One more day. One more day until you find out who the new Jacksonville Jaguars first round pick is. I'll tell you all of the things you need to have in your mind to prepare you for it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you tap into that location so that you do not miss an episode of the show. A show today that is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right. FanDuel, man, it's all about the NBA playoffs right now, and new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Make sure you tap in over on FanDuel right now. All right, here's what we're going to do. A day before the draft. I'll mention a few names here in the second and third segments that I'm going to name about 10 people. There's about 10 different ways that this could go. The Jaguars could stay where they are or move back. Latest smoke has them being a team that is trying to move back and procure more selections, even though they have 10. I don't think they want to end up with too many more than that. I just think they're trying to position themselves, maybe move back early and then move up from later on in the draft. I think they'll still end up with about 10 selections, even if they do that. First, we're going to start at the top of the show and talk about the calm before the storm. It's not really calm, though, but it is a little bit more calm than it will be tomorrow at this time. So what you get now is tomorrow you'll get quiet time. In my experience with the draft, you'll get quiet time tomorrow. Today you're going to get a lot of noise about moving and shaking and who they want. The latest, if you haven't heard, is that the Jaguars want Ashton, Genti, but then they might want Teteroa McMillan, and then, well, they can continue to add to the trenches. So a guy, if they move back, that they may be targeting is Kelvin Banks, the tackle out of Texas, who I was in on at the end of the regular season and still during college football season. The love for him kind of died down a little bit nationally, but there are some questions about some aspects of his game, but I actually really, really do like him as a football player. A lot of talk about him. So much talk about Travis Hunter. Should they trade up for Travis Hunter? Scenarios all over the place about the Jacksonville Jaguars and what they're going to do and the speculation. And so many people talking about James Gladstone. There were pieces written this morning about Tony Boselli and his impact. It's just so much. Like Liam Cohen, these people that make touchdowns. You saw me do a show on that yesterday, that the Jaguars need touchdown makers. All of those things are true. The Jaguars have a lot of things that they can use, and that's why I'm telling people that they're either going to go in a way that's going to work or they're going to go in a way that's not going to work. And if they go a direction that doesn't work, trust me, we'll be here and y'all will be here criticizing them every single day. But to think that there's only one or two ways that this thing can go is a little bit naive, and that's not the way that this process works. There's a lot of different ways the Jaguars can help themselves. A lot of ways they can help themselves. I'm going to start naming them in segment 2, but one of the things that everyone has to realize is don't get mad at them if they don't do what you want them to do, and the only reason you're angry is because they didn't do what you wanted them to do. I know that sounds weird and confusing that I said it that way, but I'm dead serious. If they don't do what you want them to do, if you want to get upset about it a little bit, you could be upset because that's when you explain because what you wanted to do allows them to do this or that or the third. Then it's easy to just sit back and just say, okay, well, can they still accomplish all of those things that I said, especially since I know that the draft, you ready for this? I'm about to drop a big one on you. The draft doesn't end on Thursday night. You know, there's drafts on Friday and more picks even on Saturday, right? So they can probably accomplish a lot of the things that you guys want them to accomplish anyway. Just don't get angry that they're not doing it the way that you're doing it, because that's usually what this is about. Because everybody knows, at least they should know from history, and I keep pointing this out over and over again, that there's a difference between playing the game the way the draft is supposed to be played and then playing actual games and then having the results of those draft picks mean something on the field. There's never a point where we all come back and say, see, they're justified. Because if that's the case, Trent Baalke probably would have kept his job because he drafted Brian Thomas Jr. in the first round, and it turned out to be, to me, the home run of the entire draft, along with Jaden Daniels. So my thing is, it's not just about getting the draft right. It's not just, well, kind of is about getting the draft right, but getting it right from a standpoint of making sure that the players that you pick will eventually end up playing well for you on the field. Some of the ones that you pick early, you want them to play early. It's not about being right based on what everybody's consensus board says that you were supposed to do. People will only do that the first 4 or 5 days. Once training camp starts, ain't nobody going to care if your team is winning. Trust me. It happens every single year. Also, when you look at the draft boards, most of them are pretty similar. I understand the ones at the top being that similar. Like I saw something where somebody gave a dude credit because he hit 10 picks. And it's very hard to do. The most I've ever hit on is 8. But come on now, he got 7 out of the first 8 correct. That means because nobody did anything last year that was really unpredictable. So you're giving him credit for getting 7 out of the first 8 and 9 out of the first 11 when teams didn't really move around. Moving around is what makes it really hard to pinpoint exactly what it is your team's going to do. The other things that makes it very difficult to pinpoint is when you get new regimes, and you don't really have that much of a track record of blending those. Like for the Jaguars, it's 3 entities because it's alignment. This is on a new alignment staff, right? So the coach, GM, and the EVP, they all have to be on the same page, and we're wondering how those negotiations going and how are they sitting there talking. There also is no incumbent GM on the team. So what that means is there ain't anybody sitting there that's fighting for these players. The only thing that's fighting for those players, the ones that are already on the team, is the tape that they put out. And to be quite honest, it probably has a little bit to do with how those people felt, mainly Gladstone and Liam Cohen, how they felt about said players before they got here. Namely, Gabe Davis. They keep talking about adding receivers. He mentioned 3 receivers. He didn't even mention that dude, and that dude's the highest paid wide receiver on the team. But I got people telling me, oh, man, you don't know what you're talking about. You sleeping on Gabe Davis. They're sleeping on Gabe Davis. I ain't sleeping on Gabe Davis. They mentioned 3 dudes, and they didn't mention him. And then they talked about adding more people in the draft. That kind of tells you what they feel, right? And maybe they can prove us wrong. But there are about 10 different ways that this team can go. Ironically that I said that, one of them is wide receiver. People talking about Ted McMillan. You tell me if they could take Tetorio McMillan that isn't, or Tetaroa McMillan, you can't tell me that isn't a signal that they need a big space-seeking pass catcher because they don't think that they have one that can complement Brian Thomas Jr. I'm not making up the rules. I'm just explaining them. I'm going to tell you how 10 different ways it can go. We'll try to split it up 5 and 5 in segment 2 and 3. We'll get to it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs have begun, man, and the action is already hot and bothered. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes it easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, picking who's going to hit the most 3-pointers, lead in steals and assists. All of that is fun. And then after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, segment 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. Talking about the different ways this thing could get done. There used to be a saying for that, but the people over at Peter will probably get mad at me. It had something to do with the cat in his skin and all of that stuff. We're going to figure out a different way to say things, but we're going to try to stay out of trouble. But there's more than one way to get the job done. How about that? Yeah, the Jags could draft Ashton, Genti and become a team that has potential superstar at running back, and he's a superstar in a different way because you can lean on him a little bit more, and he could be a volume ball toucher. Excuse me. He could be a volume carrier of the football. And I got to watch myself with these cats. I used to have to do that, but now the whole world is taking on this barbershop nature where you got to pause everything. So, yeah, there you go. I just did it. But in any event, he could become a part of a three-way deal with Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ashton Genti, right? That would look good. Then you think about Ted McMillan or Teteroy McMillan, right? You think about the things that he can do at 6'4.5", 6'5", with Brian Thomas Jr. ripping and running all around here, with the game being schemed up the way it's going to be schemed up, and giving Trevor Lawrence a big old target to be throwing the ball to. Of course, that's a trade down scenario. I could see them going offensive line in a number of ways. Like they could really, really like Will Campbell more than they're letting on, or more than people around the league. They got a pretty good offensive lineman right there in the building that can give them an idea about whether or not the kid can play. And granted, just because you play the position don't mean you can identify everybody that can play the position. But that is something more to lean on than just going, with other people's draft boards or draft scenarios. That, having Tony Baselli in the building in that role where he does have personnel power and a say-so in all of that, it really does help that, he had that experience at a very, very high level, so he kind of knows what it's supposed to look like. He even probably can help you with the defensive line, probably the whole roster. It's not just, you got to be helping people with the position that they play, but Will Campbell, Armand Membu, and don't forget about Kelvin Banks. Kelvin Banks is a dude that they may look at with that power. And there's some people that got issues with certain things about his game, like his balance and all of that stuff. A lot of that stuff can be fixed, man. And I know when you're picking a dude at 5, you want him to come in and be ready to play. But if you move back, I tell people this about the NBA a lot. There aren't very many people in the NBA when they're drafted that don't need some sort of tweaking or help to improve in certain areas. Michael Jordan's about the only dude I remember that came into the league and didn't need anything. Like LeBron needed to work on his jump shot a little bit, work on his free throws. But it was very, very minimal. It's like nothing that you could really sit there and just point out and say, well, I wouldn't draft him. But in football, we do that. In football, a guy can have one characteristic that's a little bit off or just a little bit sketchy in your eyes, and folks will point to it going like, no, we can't draft him, man, because of that. No. Did you see this? No. Especially when it comes to guys in the top 5. They do that with every single position at quarterback. But I just named you 5 guys on offense that can help the Jaguars. If they go either one of those ways, well, 3 of them you might think it's the same, but they're really not, because with Will Campbell, he's a tackle/guard. Like, he's going to start on the left side of your line, and maybe his future ends up being one thing or the other, but he doesn't start out there. Membo is a right tackle, so that now means that it's Anton Harrison that will be in competition, in my opinion, with Walker Little for the left tackle spot, or it means you're going to move on from somebody before the end of this year, probably around the trade deadline, if you don't have any injuries, because you already got your depth that you signed in free agency, right? So, and Kelvin Banks is a pure left tackle. If you take him, there ain't no if he can play guard. And some people think maybe, but I don't think he bends like that to play guard. So it does. Those, while they play the same position group, selecting one of those 3 guys has different ramifications for this roster. So that's why I'm going to say 5 different people, even though 3 of those people played the same position. Of course, we mentioned Genti, and we also mentioned McMillan. Now let's go over to the defense. There's a lot of ways they can go. It's not the same when you're looking at Abdul Carter and Jalen Walker. They're different. Walker, I believe, can play. Well, let me just say it like this. Abdul Carter has had extensive time at linebacker. Walker has had some time at linebacker. The irony is that you hope Walker spends more time at linebacker because he doesn't have the same length at 6'1", 243, but then that he becomes just a really, really good football player that you use on third downs and in other situations. And you capitalize on his intensity, his smarts, his instincts, and all of that stuff. Abdul Carter, he can play linebacker too. He's instinctive, but he's a dude you probably want to see lined up a little bit more on the defensive line, even though they both have experience. They kind of do it in different ways, right? One guy does it with quickness and twitchiness, and the other guy does it with a motor that just doesn't quit and a whole bunch of power, right? So those are two separate players also. So that's 7 guys that I reasonably mentioned that they could go in different directions. Mason Graham is considered by some to be the best. He ain't the best to everybody, but to some, he is the safest pick. And he might be also the guy who is scheme-proof, meaning he can do more than just penetrate up the middle and rush the passer. So he is, on most boards I've seen, or at least in like the 85 percentile maybe, he's the best defensive lineman on the board. You can't go wrong with a dude like that, right? But just because you can't go wrong with him doesn't mean it's the best pick or that you can absolutely go right with him. If they take Mason Graham, I ain't going to be mad at him at all. At all. It just means that they probably have a little bit more faith in the things that he can accomplish than some of the other people. And that's fine. I want the Jaguars to think for themselves. So that's 8 people. Who could the other people be? Could it be Kenneth Grant if they move back some? While I believe that position probably rounds out the Jaguars front 7 better than anybody else does from a starter standpoint, I don't know if he is Dexter Lawrence or Vita Vea. Is he that kind of dude? Is he just big, or is he big and strong and he plays that way? So the thing is there's always questions about dudes, but to think that they're going to come away here with a nose guard after day one, I just don't think that that's what they're going to do. Even though I have done podcasts and I've said this before, that I think that he might be the dude that actually is the best fit. But we have to remember, it's not about filling you squares and just having fits. It's about getting guys that are going to be really, really good players that can play beyond the X's and O's. They can do what you want, but they can do a whole bunch more than that. And that's where the thing with Kenneth Grant, when you have a top 5 pick, is that the guy you want to end up with? I don't know if that is the answer. Travis Hunter. He is the one player I believe is worth trading up for. He's the one guy I believe if you got to go to 3, I think you're going to have to go to 2, but to get to 2, you're going to have to give up a second-round pick and then maybe a third. Now you get into the positional aspect of it, the positional value aspect of it, and you start asking yourself, can we really do that? Can we give up 3 picks to move up to take Travis Hunter, even though he's going to play 2 positions in the league? Perhaps that is something that the Jaguars could do and pull off. I'll tell you what, let's ponder that and we'll push that to segment 3. We'll talk about Hunter and we'll talk about some other guys. And we'll actually tell you a little bit about, of all the players I just mentioned, who gives them the best look immediately and who is the dude that I believe as the season goes on that could be somebody that could really, really help them towards the end of the year. And you know what the end of the year means. The end of the year means playoffs. We'll talk about that more here on Locked On Jaguars. And today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Amazon Fire TV and Locked On. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? I bet you didn't. Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included. And you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, Black Ops, and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Here you go. This is what you do, man. You head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller is required, however. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, first and second generation, and Backfire TV Cube, 3rd generation. All right, running along here on the day before, the calm before the storm here on Locked On Jaguars, talking about the Jaguars' potential and who they could pick. We mentioned 10 names. I'm going to go through them again, and I'm going to tell you two things. What it can make the Jaguars look like early, what it would hopefully lead to late, and then what would be next in the second and third round on day 2 if they went that way. First, let's go with Genti. If the Jaguars take Ashton Genti up front, the Jaguars would in my opinion, have to either, based on the way the board is falling, go ahead and look at receiver, go ahead and make it all offensive, right? Or that might be the point where you go over and just take the best player available if he's a defensive player. Now, it probably would be the place where I would find a corner if that's what they want, or the best safety that's still on the board if I'm Jacksonville. But they also might look at the line. I think if you bypass a defensive tackle in the first round, a good place to get one is the third round, right at the top of the third round, because I think then you could probably push that a little bit towards nose tackle than a 3 technique, and then maybe get TJ Sanders or somebody like that. If you double up in the third round, and let's say you take Jamari Caldwell, if he's still there, and TJ Sanders from South Carolina, ain't nobody going to be mad at you because you hit a double dip. You helped the interior pass rush, but you also helped the base defense be able to stop the run early. But that would be after wide receiver Ashton Genti. Same thing to me with running back Ashton Genti. If they took Ted McMillan, but now if they did that, they move back. And in a couple of these scenarios, I think if they take anybody except Genti or Mason Graham or trading up for Travis Hunter, everybody else, they can move back. Abdul Carter, you ain't moving back either. But, I don't think he's going to be there. I think the Giants are going to sop him up real quick, or either trade back, and whoever comes up, they're going to get him because he's a pass rusher, and that is something that you give up extra picks to go and get. But I think it's the same thing whether it's running back or wide receiver early. The difference is you'd have an extra pick if it's McMillan. If you went backwards and you got an extra third or an extra second, depending on how far you go, then that might change what you do a little bit, and it might make you a little bit of a wild card to maybe even come back up into the end of the first round. If they go offensive line, then I think they do look at a skill position in the second round, whether it's a running back or a wide receiver. I would gamble wide receiver first. I think the only reason I'm prioritizing Genti here a little bit is because of him, not the position, but that particular player. That's what I think they would do. If they go linebacker, I think they could go in a number of ways. If they go linebacker / edge, which that's what it is, it'll be aimed at improving their overall athleticism at the second level and their pass rush on obvious passing downs. They could still opt to go get a defensive tackle. They could still get a safety to double up on defense. And at that point, too, they can still swing back and come back and touch up wide receiver, running back, or perhaps even an offensive lineman if they fall to the top of the second round. So that is what would be next for them and what the team would look like. I think Genti gives them an identity on offense to where you have to really, really pick your poison. Especially, this is based on not just him, but how he's going to be used and what the mindset and the mentality of the team will be. I think this makes Genti, Brian Thomas Jr., and probably Travis Etienne like the other change of pace back. I think this makes the Jaguars actually a dangerous football team to be able to score a lot of points. More so than Ted McMillan does, in my opinion, because I think it may be a situation where with McMillan and Brian Thomas Jr., you might become a little bit too much of a pass-happy team for me, as opposed to, because when you take a wide receiver top 10, they didn't even do that with Brian Thomas Jr. That means that they have a plan for him where they're going to feed both of them, and then that makes them a little bit more pass. That doesn't mean they won't run the football, because Minnesota does it with 2 receivers. Philadelphia certainly does it. But it will make them more of a 2 wide receiver team than I think people are really prepared for them to be. When you have those 2 guys, you become Cincinnati a little bit, right? So the thing is does that make you a little bit predictable to be able to do that? Offensive line, it just signals to me if they go offensive line, what they're telling you is we are going to beat your brains out. If y'all don't know, Philly just re-signed Cam Jurgens So Philly has 4 guys at their respective positions on their offensive line that are top 6 in the league money-wise. Don't tell me what you can and can't do. You just have to hit on your draft picks. The Eagles have a whole bunch of defensive players on rookie contracts, and that's why they're able to do this. And those guys are playing at a high level. So there's a way that you can do this if you're Jacksonville. I don't think they've invested enough into the offensive line yet. Well, I don't think they've invested enough for people to say that drafting another lineman at 5 would be overkill. I just don't, when you consider where Philly is right now with what they have. Linebacker, I think it has to be about the player, not necessarily the position. That would mean they just want Abdul Carter or Jalen Walker on their team. And they want them on their team because of those things that they bring to the team that actually makes the team better. And they're going to play a whole bunch of snaps and be versatile pieces. But it's not necessarily a position that you think, okay, they need something. This ain't about need. This is about just getting that guy on your roster if you're Jacksonville. If there's a wild card in this position, in this draft, if there's a player right now, you ask me, are the Jags going to take him? No, but I bet you they really, really love him, but they just feel like they're okay at that spot. That would be Jahdae Barron. From everything I've heard about them, I think he is their type of football player. I really do. But I also believe that I think they like where they are with corner. Doesn't mean they won't touch it in round 2 or round 3. But if they like him just that much, if they think that he is a better version or a healthier version of Jair Alexander or someone like that, he's big enough. He's 5'10 and a half, 5'11. He's scrappy. He's a fighter. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Tre'Davious White when he was healthy. I just think he's going to be a real good football player. And I think a part of them looks like, damn, man, if we just needed him, we could move back maybe 8, 9 spots or 5 or 6 spots and still get him at 10 or 11. I've seen him mocked at 10 to the New Orleans Saints. So that's dangerous to think that you could get him later than that. But I'm telling you, man, from everything I have heard, I've heard people compare him to Aeneas Williams and all other kinds of stuff. Watch out for him and watch out for him at number 7 to the Jets. But I do believe, even though the Jaguars don't need him, they probably think he's a pretty good player. And that is not sourced information. That is just for me. If you want sourced information, go and visit Locked On NFL Draft. Check out our mock draft. I ain't going to tell you who I picked. You can see it for yourself. It's on the Locked On NFL Draft page or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you make that your second listen. It's the last time y'all will hear my voice until draft day. Tomorrow I'll have a really, really good show for you, getting you ready for tomorrow's pick. Until then, y'all take care. We'll see you next time. And thank you for spending 28 minutes with me here on Locked On Jaguars.